Santoku, Gyuto, Bunka. They're all different. Brad here from Sakai Ichimonji Mitsuhide, and we make a lot of kitchen knives, over 2,000 varieties in fact. And many of them were designed because customers like yourself asked us to make them. While we make knives for Japanese professional chefs, just as many people cook at home. So let's look at the differences between two of the commonly used knives in the house, the Gyuto and the Santoku. And we'll talk a bit about the Bunka too, as well as why we don't actually make many of them. Stick around and you might be surprised. First of all, let's look at the Santoku. This is probably the most commonly used kitchen knife in Japanese households, and it's being used a lot overseas as well, like this one here, kind of more designed for our overseas market because of the Japanese handle. The word itself, Santoku, actually entered the Oxford Dictionary in 2024, so it's gaining lots of popularity overseas. Santoku itself translates loosely as 3 virtues, and this is because the knife is good at cutting 3 major types of ingredient: fish, meat, and vegetables. And its history traces all the way back to the Edo period. According to the Nagoya Sword Museum at least, back then people used a double-edged knife shaped like a rectangle called a nakiri, you may have seen one of these before, as their home-use vegetable knife. And it's said that they may have done chopping and stuff with it too. Combining that with the Western introduced Gyuto or chef's knife, the Bunka knife was born. Then in the 1940s to 1950s, the knife's final form as a Santoku came into play. Let's take a closer look at that Santoku shape here with this one instead. A typical Santoku has a fairly straight curvature at the back, retaining some of that flat blade characteristic that the nakiri has, but it curves gently towards the tip. And this gentle curve allows the blade to easily make contact with the cutting board, preventing incomplete cuts or food being stuck together. Santoku generally come at about 180 millimeters long, but many Santoku at 145 millimeters exist as well. While the Gyuto has the kanji for cow right in its name, the knife is actually really versatile, also suitable for cutting meat, fish, and vegetables. They come in lots of different sizes too, anywhere from like 180 mil or so, same as the Santoku, all the way up to 300 millimeters long. Professionals in Japan normally use 210 to 240 mil, but we have seen 270 mil used in quite a few overseas kitchens too, especially in America where they often use 10 to 12 inch chef's knives. If you're using in the home, we think 180 mil to 210 mil is a great length, but feel free to go for 240 if you're working with larger meals or maybe doing some bulk prep, or maybe you have a Santoku already and you want to expand it to something a little bit bigger. Where the Gyuto differs from the Santoku though is the cutting edge. So this one here curves all the way from the tip to the blade, like all the way from base to tip. And this tip is a lot more acute than you might find on a Santoku. This gives it a lot more precision when trimming or separating meat. The Gyuto makes less contact with the cutting board than a Santoku in comparison though, so you need to make sure to cut correctly and use proper technique so that your cut ingredients don't stay stuck together. You can get around this by using proper technique, like I said, one that places the tip or the kisaki of the knife onto the cutting board and then cutting with a sliding motion. If you use a more vertical style cutting motion, like a chopping motion, there's a fairly high chance the cut food's just going to stay stuck together, so you need to change things a little bit. We find a slicing style technique tends to work quite well for this. A more advanced technique would actually keep your tip in contact with the cutting board the entire time, moving your wrist to slide the blade like so. This takes some practice, but it allows for a really clean cut. Which is better though between the Santoku and the Gyuto? For us at least, we think if you're a cooking enthusiast, the Gyuto is the better option. But some people, predominantly those in Japan, may simply be more accustomed to using a Santoku because the cutting techniques are different, and for Santoku, cutting techniques aren't really needed. So it's hard to definitively say which is better. Both are good, and you should try out both before purchase if you can. Santoku knives are great, and they don't need advanced cutting techniques to prevent incomplete cuts. So decide based on your own experiences or what you're looking for your cooking potential to be. Let's take a look at some of the different Santokus and Gyutos that we manufacture to teach you a little bit more about steels and how they might differ. First off is our 8AN series. This is a relatively affordable professional grade stainless steel knife, and we think it's a perfect example of an introductory standard. The series is made using AUS 8 stainless steel, which is relatively low hardness in the world of Japanese kitchen knives and steel. That part's important. We finished this with a hardness slightly above the average of knives using this material during the heat treatment process, making them a pretty satisfying choice for anyone stepping into the world of high-end kitchen knives. Maybe if it's your first professional one or something like that, you just want to try something different, it's a good way to go in. Next up is our G-Line series, and our G-Line series has a very storied history. The series uses VG1 stainless steel, sometimes this is called V-Kin 1 or V-Gold 1, and it's a lot harder than AUS 8 steel, which results in the blade staying sharp for much longer, as well as having a higher peak sharpness overall. Simply put, it cuts better and stays cutting well for longer. The G-Line was developed in an era where stainless steel knives had a pretty poor reputation for being dull and just not being able to cut well. The G-Line series, through a lot of trial and error, broke that tradition, and it's been supporting professional chefs in a cost-effective way now for over 40 years. When you first sharpen a G-Line, you might get a sensation that it's a bit slippery on the stone, but it will take an incredibly keen edge. Keep in mind, steel technology has changed, and many harder steels now exist, but we're still really proud of this line, and it's still popular today because of how long it stays sharp for and how cost-effective that it is. We often see it used in low to mid-price range restaurants who need to do like a lot of prep work every day, and they might need a knife that stays sharp for a longer time and can have slightly more heavy work done with it, can be a little bit more robust. For that, we find the G-Line is perfect. Next up is our current best-selling series, the Sword FV10. It has superior durability and overall toughness compared to the G-Line, at the drawback of costing a little bit more. Made with VG10 stainless steel, the heat treatment on the Sword FV10 is very meticulously crafted, again creating a knife that is slightly above the hardness than other general VG10 knives that you'll see on the market. We really confidently recommend the Sword FV10 in almost all situations because it's a knife that has a great balance between practicality and high performance with really no weaknesses. So it's great for home use, it's very popular for home use, but it's also great professionally too. The handle itself is a little more balanced too, making it more comfortable to hold with a touch of luxury added using the indigo blue wood and nickel silver on the bolster. We've actually made a full video on how we manufacture all of our Sword FV10 step by step on our YouTube channel, and a link to that video will be in our description. If you're curious about knife manufacturing and processes themselves, then you might well be, given you're watching a video like this. We highly recommend taking a look. Now for that final tip we mentioned earlier, why don't we make many Bunka? We get asked about Bunka all the time, but we don't make many. It's another multi-purpose knife after all, and many people come to Japan searching for the perfect Bunka for their kitchen. There are a couple of reasons for this, but mostly it comes down to history and the needs of the modern day Japanese chef. The Bunka, like you see here, is characterized by its shape, specifically this pointed K-tip here. And this knife actually evolved from the Nakiri with its reticular blade, like I talked about earlier. Kind of like putting a Gyuto and Nakiri together, and here's a Nakiri here for reference. The Bunka effectively replaced the Nakiri as the all-purpose knife used in the home as meat became more widely eaten in Japan. And while the Nakiri excels at vegetables, this specialized tip allows for more precise cuts and work to be done. The tip itself, though, is rather fragile, and not everybody really needed such a pointed tip for precision work. Because of this, the Santoku knife was created afterwards, and this is more widely used today, taking the place of the Bunka, much like how the Bunka itself did with the Nakiri in the past. In short, people generally buy a Santoku instead, so there's less reason to manufacture Bunka these days. Hasn't been fully superseded, they are still on the market, they look lovely, they're a beautiful thing, and they're fun to use, but at least in Japan, pretty much just use Santokus instead, and because we make knives for a Japanese audience, we mostly make Santoku instead. We have a much larger range of those compared to the Bunka. We do have Bunka though, like this Silver Steel 3 tie here, which is one we've been stocking to pretty good fanfare as a relatively new, cost-performance friendly, slightly more Sakai style manufacturing knife. So after all that, let us quickly recap. With 3 major multi-purpose knives on the market, which between the Santoku, Gyuto, and Bunka should you get? None are bad choices, they are all just different choices. The Gyuto is going to be best for precision work as well as trimming meat, but you need to make sure you use proper cutting technique to prevent pieces of food being stuck together. You may unintentionally have these already. We do a lot of rolling cut outside of Japan, and that is something that works with the Gyutos really well. The Santoku though is best for those who do not have cutting technique knowledge. They're very easy to use and they can kind of do almost anything you throw at them, so if you're just looking to get into knives for the first time with the minimal amount of training or exposure, Santoku is a great choice. The Bunka is special, it allows for ultra precise work, so if you need absolute precision, it's going to be best. But the Santoku has made it obsolete in many other ways, so if you're specifically after precision, it's good, otherwise you can go for other choices. We do hope though with videos like this and other little training things that we do, you can learn a little bit more about not only what knives to get or to use, but the history behind them as well as their manufacturing. Go watch that manufacturing video I talked about before. It's a lot of fun. You get to learn a lot. And despite how these look, these are very artisanally made. It's a fun time. Get in.